Wow.
Alright, today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 indie fantasy, sci-fi, and fantasy books so far. And for you guys who do not know what indie actually means, it's when the book is published by the author themselves versus a big house publisher, working behind the scenes. So all the work is on the author's shoulder to get that book into your hands as the reader. So, of course, writing the story, getting the cover illustration, formatting the book, and then, of course, marketing as well in terms of making you aware the book even exists. Right, there is a lot of work that goes into putting out a book, and it's all on the author's shoulders. And in my opinion, some of the best books, some of the best stories I've read so far have come from indie authors. And what I wanted to do today is just highlight 10 of those books that left a huge impact on me that came from an indie author. So if you're ready, let's just dive into it. Alright, the first book is going to be a first contact story that gets you in your feels. If you ever wanted to read another book that's similar to Project Hail Mary from a rural perspective, then I have to recommend Small Town Problems by Chris Ritchie. This is a story of a building friendship that I really want to read again because one, it's not that long at all, and two, it has cozy vibes that I really do not read that often. Power of friendship, a rural setting in a small town. Cool alien technology and an alien with an accent. The author is also planning this to be the first entry of 3 in this series, and I am so looking forward to what's going to happen after this one here. I also have a full video dedicated to this book out right now, and I have a full review on my blog as well. So if you want to check that out, get some more details on this book. But if you are a fan of Project Hail Mary in any capacity, I think you should at least attempt to read this one. Read the first few chapters, check it out. I think you're going to have a really fun time in this story. And it's one that really just got me in my feels, and I love books that are able to do that. And that is going to be Small Town Problems, number 10 for me today. So what do you get when you mix the noir genre, a dash of cyberpunk, a sprinkle of psychedelics, and a heaping amount of mushrooms? You get Mushroom Blues by Adrian M. Gibson. And man, I enjoyed my read through this story immensely. If you're a fan of detective type of novels, this one is a no-brainer. Or maybe a no mushroom capper? Bad joke. Sorry, I'm just trying to be a fun guy.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, but for real, this is a story of a detective trying to solve a case of a murdered child, a mushroom child. I say that because in this story, in this universe, we have a race of people who are part mushroom. Our main character, Henrietta Hoffman, has to work with an ally she is not that keen to work with. And from here, we have a fast-paced, gripping story that takes us into the depths of this gritty and spore-filled world that truly feels unique and different from anything that I've ever read before. And I also really enjoyed my read through this because this is my second detective type of book that I have ever read. And I'm a big fan of detective type of books now. Also, the ending perfectly sets up future sequels in this universe, which I know the author is working on sequels right now. So if you're a fan of a gritty type of noir feel, this is a book that I think you're really going to enjoy. The next book came to me out of nowhere. I was not expecting it at all, but I'm so happy that the author did send it my way, with that book being called The Dryads Crown by David Hopkins. This is a noble, bright fantasy story about a trained assassin trying to settle down and have a normal life. However, she is swept into a grand story that takes her down the path towards evil's door. And I actually listened to this book through the audio version on Audible. Actually, it was on Spotify. And let me tell you, the narrator did a fantastic job bringing this story to life. But if I were to read this physically, and if you were to read it physically, you will have some awesome illustrations in the book as well that are pretty dang stunning. And I think it would actually add a lot of good immersion elements to the read as well, because there's a few illustrations here that perfectly capture the vibe and the character itself that I really enjoyed. A couple things that really stood out to me in the story was the writing style, the prose, and just the overall feel of the story itself. Hopkins writes in a way that feels poetic, but it's also accessible at the same time. The words just flow off your tongue, but it doesn't leave you feeling confused. I also have to say the feeling of the book was very different for me because it felt cozy, whimsical at times, and I really enjoy the aspect of it because usually when I do go into the fantasy genre, it's from a grimdark or dark fantasy perspective. With this being in the noble bright genre, which I really do not read that often, where hope overpowers despair. But whenever I did load this book up on Spotify, it always left me in a really good mood. Even though there are some dark elements in the book, of course, there are some evil characters, okay? So again, this is a full-on epic story of a few different characters. One in particular, follow her from the very beginning to a very pivotal moment towards the tail end of this book. And you have some really nice illustrations in here as well. And guess what? There's also talking dragons, baby. So there is a lot to love from this book here. And the author did a fantastic job in terms of presenting you information in the very beginning that gets brought up again, almost full circle, towards the tail end of the book, and it felt really, really satisfying. Again, that is the Dryads Crown by David Hopkins. Alright, the next book, if you're a fan of John Gwynn's Bloodsworn Saga or Joe Abercrombie's First Law, the next book I think you're really going to enjoy because it had a mix of both, in my opinion, with that book being called A Memory of Song by Scott Palmer. Before I talk about this book in particular, I wanted to talk about his novella called A Sound of Starfall that takes place before this book. That novella blew me the freak away. It was one of the best novellas I've ever read, and I think it's a great starting point for you to read and get a taste of Scott Palmer's writing. It was amazing, okay? But this book was also really good too. We got magic, we got lore, we have crazy creatures, we got big-ass tree swords, we got prophecies, and we have very fascinating characters that really feel relatable as well. In this story, we switch between two different POVs, with one of them being my favorite female characters that I've ever read in fantasy, with her name being Wolfie. She has a story of revenge, and oh boy, do you want to see her get that revenge, because it's a fantastic story. The world is bleak, the planet is dead and basically dying. I mean, people can't even start a fire. But I would not say that this story is grimdark, but it definitely leans towards dark fantasy, so there's a fine line there. Also, the author is pretty close to finishing up the first draft of the sequel of this book, so if you do end up picking this one up, you should expect a sequel sometime in 2025, most likely. So again, that is A Memory of Song, Scott Palmer. Alright, the next book has one of my favorite prologues of all time, with the book being called Sealed Empire by Norbert Jivix. I mean, just look at this cover, man. Do you not see this, like, cyber Leviathan monster right there? I mean, look at that. Like crazy. I mean, one look at that, and I'm like, sign me up, baby. From page 1, you are thrust into an open sea with these huge waves just smashing against your ship. Lightning flashing, thunder pounding, and something big, something inhuman, rising from the depths of the ocean below. And in the story, we do follow a few different characters, with one going on this very dangerous and epic journey that pulls him away from the love of his life. And the other character is pulled into a spiderweb of politics and intrigue while she tries to just survive. And what's even more crazy about this book is the blend of science fiction and fantasy. The ending especially was mind-bending, jaw-dropping. I didn't know that we would go in that direction at all, because when you first read the book and you're going through it from the very beginning, it has that medieval type of feel, but towards the end, it feels like a straight-up sci-fi novel, and I freaking loved it. So if you like action, mind-bending endings, stories told from the open sea, and cyber Leviathan monsters, I think you will have a fantastic time with this book, just like I did, and I'm super looking forward to the sequel of this book. And also, I have an interview with this author on my channel you can go check out to get some more details on the Sealed Empire. I also have an interview with Scott Palmer as well, the last book, you can check out as well. And also, 2 books before that, Mushroom Blues, I have an interview of him as well. So that is going to be Sealed Empire. The next book is on the sci-fi side of things, and it was definitely easily one of my most fun reads of the year so far, with that being Theft of Fire by Devin Erickson. I found myself completely immersed into the story and laughing on several occasions. So in the story, we follow our main character being Marcus Warnock, who is right here, and he is just a space miner who's basically trying to make ends meet, when in the beginning of the book, we find out that his ship is hijacked. And essentially, a super beautiful, genetically modified woman, really tiny as well, is now commanding her ship. She's the captain now. And from here, it was such a fun thrill ride, full of action, humor, relatable characters, really cool technology, and of course a mystery that involves a heist type of operation. There's also a little sprinkle of alien technology that was really cool and intriguing. And also something else you might be familiar with now, with that being AI. I especially love the way AI was presented in the story, because it felt different from a typical sci-fi book that goes into the dark area of how AI can be bad. with this book having a little bit of a different flavor of AI, and I really enjoyed that. So this is a book that definitely has a small cast of characters, but the story itself is huge in scope. And I'm super excited to see where Erickson takes us next in this series, with the next book coming out, I think, in 2025, I'm pretty sure. So I am definitely going to be on the lookout for that. So if you're a fan of sci-fi at all, if you're a fan of hard sci-fi, with this book being kind of close to hard sci-fi, but not too much, I think you'll have a fantastic time with Death of Fire, because it's full of action, humor again, and a really fun story that I can't wait to see what happens next. So again, Theft of Fire. Alright, the next book, spot number 4 for me, is going to be called Lost Souls by Ryan Skeffington. So, you like sci-fi? You like grimdark? What about Halo? If you like any of those, I think you're going to have a really fun time in Lost Souls, just like I did. This is a story about a young man who is trying to break free from the ruling elite who is controlling all of existence on the rings. That's right, humanity is now living on these giant rings, similar to Halo rings, the video game. And also, Earth is basically a dead planet. Yeah, so, yeah, a lot of these stories focus on Earth being gone, so that's kind of, ominous. And from the very first paragraph in this book, I think you'll have a really good understanding of the overall tone to expect in this story. A bleak look on humanity, but with moments of greatness. This book was just so much fun for me. I think a big portion of it has to be the prose or the writing style. The way that Ryan describes some of the events, the scenes, the environment, it's very vivid. You can picture it in your mind easily, and it feels a bit icky, but in a good way. We also have big hammer action scenes where basically overpowered, genetically modified Power Rangers are fighting for show. We also have really cool technology in this universe as well, because there's also a special resource found in this world, this universe, that allows for really cool technology to take place. And I highly enjoyed reading this book, and I think you'll have a fantastic time with this book being called Lost Souls. Again, he's working on the sequel right now, and I actually had a chance to beta read the second book, which is going to be called Eternal Dreams, and I had a blast in the beta read. I think if you have a good time with Lost Souls, you'll be in good hands with Eternal Dreams, which should be coming out sometime in 2025. So again, that's going to be Lost Souls. The next book for me is going to be from an author who is an instant buy author for me now. Every book that I've read by this author has been an absolute banger. And the book that I have in mind for this video is going to be The Horns of Grief by E.J. Dobell. If you're a fan of grimdark at all, I think you need to check out E.J. Dobell absolutely ASAP. This has some of the best prose that I've ever read. It's so vivid, it really just paints a horrific, beautiful picture in your mind through all the crazy, bloody action scenes that take place in this book. This is actually the sequel in an ongoing series called the Blood and Steel Saga, and my goodness, I am so happy with this series. I actually read book 2.5 that comes in between The Horns of Grief and book number 3 coming out, I think, next year in 2025, and that book was a banger as well. And he calls it a novella, but it's 280 pages, so I don't think that's really a novella, but it is shorter than this one here, right? This book, it has a really tiny font too, so this book can easily be close to 600, maybe 700 pages if it had a larger font. But my goodness, action, blood, magic, characters that you just want more of. With one in particular, if you enjoyed Glocta at all in a First Law series, there's one character in particular that I have in mind in this series that I think you're going to love, because he is just so comical, witty, and also kind of a bit evil, and he's a bit crazy, and I freaking love it. So, has some really badass female characters as well that know how to use a sword, absolutely, and the magic system is really expanded upon in book number 2 compared to book number 1, and I really enjoyed seeing it, and I am so excited to get back into this universe. I want to get back and reread it again before book number 3 comes out, because apparently book number 3 is going to be almost the size of 2 of these. So it's going to be a pretty big book. But E.J. Dobell, instant buy author for me. If you like grimdark, you're going to like this series. I guarantee it. Alright, the next book's going to be on the sci-fi side of things again. And looking at my list here, I mean, I think I have a pretty good mix of sci-fi and fantasy. But I will tell you that I am more of a fan of sci-fi books, which is probably why the last 2 are considered, sci-fi. But maybe sci-fi is just another subgenre of fantasy. I mean, it really depends on who you ask. But this one does take place in space, with this book having an absolute banger of a cover and also a banger of a story, with that being Dierock 88 by S.A. Ernster. This is a story about a young man whose father is accused of being a terrorist, and as a result, our main character is sent to the prison planet of Dryad 88. And from there we have incredible world building, really cool characters that are very intriguing and also that really have that bond, friendship develop over time with other characters. Interesting and innovative technology that has a slight cyberpunk-y feel to it as well. And a very intriguing mystery that definitely takes you from the very beginning all the way to the last page, with also out of this world creatures. For this one, if you're a fan of Red Rising by Pierce Brown or Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, I think you'll really enjoy this one right here. I'm super excited for the sequel that's coming out in 2025. I mean, also, just look at that cover one more time, okay? Yeah, that is not a lightsaber, but it kind of acts like a lightsaber, and I am here for it, absolutely. All right, the moment you've been waiting for, the last book, book number 1 on my list here, which you might know what the book is by process of elimination because I haven't talked about it yet. And it's in the thumbnail of this video, with the book being Wistful Ascending by J.C.M. Byrne. This book just simply worked for me on almost every level of what I want out of a book. Humor, action, character growth, and a mystery that pulls you all the way from the very beginning to the very end. And a lot of people like to compare this one to basically being Dragon Ball Z in space, which I can kind of see that because our main character is basically a superhero who is able to almost, it basically goes Super Saiyan in some moments of the story. This book in particular, I did listen to the audiobook version of the story, and the narrator did a phenomenal job bringing this story to life. But I did find out that the narrator is no longer doing fiction from the author. Actually, I have an interview with the author on my channel as well if you want to go check that out. After this, to learn more about the Wistful Ascending, the Hybrid Helix series, which has, I think, 4 or 5 books out so far. And one of the big highlights for me in this book has to be our main character being Rohan. This is a character that is very complex, that feels relatable, that's humorous, and instantly pulls you in from the very first section of dialogue that's presented like in the first couple pages. And what the story is about is essentially our main character right here, Rohan, is an overpowered dock worker who moves ships from A to B. He just grabs a ship and actually helps it dock to Wistful being the station. Also, I didn't even talk about that just yet. The station itself, the space station, is sentient, meaning it has thoughts that can talk, and actually talks to Rohan a lot. And I did not realize that until a couple chapters in. But I really like the way that was explored because I haven't read that many books with sentient spaceships before. Besides maybe To Sleep in the Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini, which kind of explored that a little bit. But highly enjoyed this book. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z in space, if you're a fan of sci-fi at all, if you like humor, I think this is the book for you. I loved it. It blew me out of the water. I can't wait to read the sequel. I have it on my shelf behind me. I just need to get to it sooner than later. But again, that's going to be Wistful Ascending, my top indie book so far. So, yeah, I freaking love it, man. That is my list, guys. My top 10 indie books. Oh! My top 10 indie books right here. And in the future, I plan to do this list again in terms of my top 10 indie books in the future, so we can see over the years how much does this list change as I continue reading more and more indie books. So let me know down below if you've read any of these indie books here in this list, and if not, are you going to read any of these right here? Also, have you read any indie books just yet? If so, which was your favorite one? Alright guys, that's all I got for you. Have a good one. Keep reading. Peace.